Well, it's looking like the Democratic race to challenge Donald Trump in November will be a choice between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Mr. Biden has seized momentum in the race with a string of victories on Super Tuesday, where party members from 14 states choose their candidates.
His campaign seemed to have been dwindling just a few days ago, but Mr. Biden has swept across the South, thanks in part to overwhelming support from the African-American community. Also giving him a boost, the backing of two major candidates who pulled out just the day before, Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg.
It's a hot night, and it seems to be getting even better. They don't call Super Tuesday for nothing. For those who've been knocked down, counted out, left behind, this is your campaign.
Mr. Sanders has counted with strong support among Latinos and younger voters, and that's helped him win in the West, including the state with the largest number of delegates, California.
But we are not only taking on the corporate establishment, we're taking on the political establishment. But we're going to win because the people understand it is our campaign, our movement, which is best positioned to defeat Trump. You cannot beat Trump with the same old kind of politics.
Live now to Simon Marks in Washington, D.C. Simon, we'll get to Bernie Sanders in a moment, but first, the man of the moment, Joe Biden. Tell us how he managed to turn this around.
Well, he managed to turn it around by combining a number of different elements to the recipe. I mean, first of all, I think, Steve, that what we're witnessing here is a comeback from the political dead. Even Joe Biden's most fervent supporters were not expecting the kind of results that he notched up last night, and that's partly due to the fact that the elites within the Democratic Party wanted to head off the prospect of a Bernie Sanders candidacy, and so they encouraged some of the younger candidates, Pete Buttigieg of Indiana, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, to drop out of the race in the 36 hours before Super Tuesday and to endorse Joe Biden for the presidency. Secondly, it's an indication of the fervent desire of Democrats in enormous numbers all over the country to turn out at the beginning of what they see as an operation to remove Donald Trump from the White House later this year. You can't question, I think, now the enthusiasm of Democrats to get themselves behind Joe Biden, a candidate whom many of them viewed as underwhelming just a few weeks ago. And thirdly, the power of the African-American vote. You cannot, in 2020, become the Democrats' presidential candidate unless you've got fervent support from African Americans in key states, particularly across the South. Joe Biden has that support. Bernie Sanders does not.
Simon, so on the other hand, it looks like it's going to be a two-horse race. But on the other hand, it was a disastrous night for Michael Bloomberg. What happened there? Is he going to have to reassess his whole campaign?
Well, they say, the people around Michael Bloomberg, that he's going to reassess his campaign now. I mean, Glenda, the humiliation heaped on Michael Bloomberg over the last few hours has been absolutely devastating. This is a man who has spent $500 million on his race for the White House, his own money, poured it in, massive advertising buys, what he described as a data-driven candidacy. He was absolutely sure that he was right to sit out the early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and wait for his opportunity to shine on Super Tuesday. And what did he win? American Samoa. He spent $500 million to win a handful of convention delegates from American Samoa. Under any normal circumstances, his campaign would be absolutely dead as a dodo today here in the United States. Let's wait and see if he decides to soldier on. At this point, he would just be pouring good money after bad, and I think there have to be real questions about the wisdom of his decision to enter the race in the first place. I mean, he was fueled in part by a disastrous television debate performance. But even before that, there was very little enthusiasm among Democrats for his candidacy, and the whole thing looks like a massive strategic and financial blunder.
So now that the primary season is over then, Simon, where do we go from here? What's next?
Well, of course, the primary season isn't over, Steve. We're only just getting revved up here. There's still about a third of the country to participate in this primary campaign. So Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden are going to engage now in scorched earth battles in the remaining states. Not because I think at this point Bernie Sanders necessarily has a path to the nomination. I mean, mathematically anything is possible. But because the more delegates at the convention that Bernie Sanders can notch up between now and the end of the primary season, the greater the voice he will seek to have in determining the Democratic Party's manifesto for the November presidential election. And that is going to be a problem for Joe Biden. Joe Biden today has that most precious commodity in American electoral politics, momentum, or Joe-mentum, of course, as the people around him are calling it. But Bernie Sanders, make no mistake, is going to have a strong voice at the convention and in determining the Democratic Party's political manifesto going into November. And that's going to be a political problem for Joe Biden in the months ahead.
Yeah, fascinating times ahead. Thanks very much, Simon Marks from Washington, D.C.